Hi. So I started my pie making journey about 6 years ago, and at the time um, I started entering pie contests at our local fair, and the main reason was at the time that the top prize was $350, and I thought, well, I can learn how to make a pie for $350, and so I tried. With the first year was huckleberry, which anybody that knows anything about pies and huckleberries knows that's not an excellent first pie to start with. So my husband and I and our new baby went out and picked enough huckleberries for a pie, got home, started making it at 11 o'clock. I was so excited to make this pie, and started making the crust, and the crust was a disaster, and next thing you know, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm finally finishing the pie to wake up the next morning early to submit it, and had no idea how that turned out. It turns out that the filling was runny and a disaster, and I went home and just cried and thought, why did I do that? I have to try again next year, because I couldn't accept defeat. And so the next year I tried again and made a strawberry rhubarb, because the fair super chose the flavor, so we had no choice. We had to make whatever they had chosen. And so I made made this strawberry rhubarb pie, and it burst out the side, and it was a complete failure again. But once again, I entered and failed miserably. And the next year I did my research and really tried to learn how to make a crust, because every year the judges would say your crust is really good but your filling isn't great. And so so that year I perfected my crust. I submitted a peach pie and I scored 4th out of like 30 pies. I came in 4th place, which isn't there wasn't a prize, but it was still a vast improvement from the previous years. And the next year was another berry pie. Once again, was somewhere between 4th and 5th. And every year the judges would say, you make the most amazing crust, but I do something wrong with the filling. And so this year was my 6th year competing, and it was apple pie. And so I did a couple days research and threw together a pie that I had never even tried before, but looked like a good pie. And then it turns out I won 1st place. And so I decided to make this video to share some tips with some people that are struggling with making pies, because it's a bit intimidating when you first start. So a couple things that I wanted to share that have incredibly helped my pie making journey is that making your pie crust in a food processor saves about half the amount of time. The first few years I was making it by hand with a pastry blender, and it was just a mess. So I started doing the food processor, and one of these, is this a food processor?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I stirred. But yeah, so I started making it in the food processor and chilling it for 2 hours minimum. People would always emphasize, you have to chill your dough, you have to chill your dough, and I would sometimes chill it and sometimes I wouldn't, and it was just as tender. But what the chilling does is it helps it to be more manageable. When it was, I mean, that's kind of obvious, you should know that, but I didn't pick up on it until this year, when I realized after chilling it for 2 hours, my dough was incredibly easy to work with. And so chill your dough. It makes a huge difference. Every berry works differently as far as thickeners go, but what we have found is that something called clear gel works incredibly for thickening your pies. It's something you can buy through King Arthur flour. We buy it from the grocery store, but it's not available everywhere. So use clear gel for your berry pies. With apple and peach, I've always used flour as a thickening agent, and there's a lot of science behind making pies. So learn your fruit and how it works, and as far as like apple goes, I found out that if you heat your apples before putting them into the pastry, that it will actually prevent the steam from the cooking apples from causing the separation of the top crust from the apples. Sometimes you'll see people with an apple pie and the top crust is separated from the fruit, from the apples, and you wonder why is there an air pocket in between their pie, and it's because allegedly the steam that's released during the cooking process has separated the pastry from the fruit. And so I pre-cook my apples in a bit of cinnamon, and I personally prefer to do lattice work. That's like my specialty. So this is the same pie that I made and won $300 at the county fair just a few days ago. And I just freehanded the lattice work. Sometimes I'll do a prefab lattice where you just roll it out on wax paper and then use your hand to flip it over, because it's super easy that way. But this year I decided just to do it by hand, and it worked out well. I'm not really sure. Another thing that I can share as a tip about your pastry is I typically do 1 cup of fat to 2.5 cups of flour, and minimal amount of liquid, usually like 4 to 5 tablespoons of ice water, and add a 1/4 teaspoon of vinegar, apple cider vinegar or white vinegar, and that just helps to stop the gluten from forming in your dough, making it tough. And salt. I think it's important to add at least a 1/2 teaspoon of salt to your pie crust, because that helps with the flavor. And then, like I said before, just chill it, and you'll end up with a wonderful pie every time if you can figure out your filling. So I hope that helps.